This is the West Virginia Soccer Association Beyond the Pitch podcast on the WVSA Digital Network. From the Sport Pens International Studios in Charleston, West Virginia, here's your host, Marcus Cole.
Welcome to the podcast. We have another great show on tap. Before we welcome our guest, I want to remind you to like, subscribe, and share our program. This helps us get the word out to others and let them know that we're providing valuable information designed for soccer players, coaches, referees, and parents. With us is Jerad Minnick, Director of Grounds for Maryland SoccerPlex, Lead Advisor, Natural Grass Advisory Group, and Field Surface Advisor for Major League Soccer. Jerad, welcome to the program.
Hey, how are you today?
Doing well. We appreciate you coming on.
Are you staying warm? It's gonna
be warm. I know. It's
cool
incredibly chilly in this part of the woods.
Well, I said to somebody the other day, we'll be cutting grass in 8 weeks. So
isn't that the truth?
Keep that in mind.
Excellent. Or you could see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Yep.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the show today. We're going to be talking to our recreational grassroots clubs, those volunteers and administrators that take care of the grass fields here in our state, and want to talk a little bit with Jerad about spring field maintenance, things that they can do to help improve their fields throughout the spring season, things they should be looking for, common problems that most fields have during the spring season, and then just, basically just giving some practical advice. So why don't you go ahead and just start us off? We have Jerad has a presentation about field maintenance. Go right ahead, Jerad.
Yeah, thank you. I think hopefully we can provide some insight. I mean, as you gave my background, I think the thing I would encourage everyone first is I'm going to have some examples. Most of my examples will be from Maryland SoccerPlex, which is a youth facility. Obviously, though, equipment-wise and staffing-wise, a little different because of a 24-field facility that's dedicated solely to maintaining fields is a little different than volunteers taking care of a field, or even pro-level examples. I got a few of those, but don't dismiss what I'm saying by immediately saying, well, we don't have that budget, we don't have the time, we don't have the people. If there's anything you can take away from what I share, just a little piece. Hopefully that's really the goal today, is just to try to help you just a little bit, if that makes sense at all. So one of the key things I like to kind of, I guess with that said, to keep an open mind with the examples, but I really enjoy quotes and kind of thinking about these things a little differently. One of my favorite quotes is, if you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always gotten. And that's really how we run our operation at SoccerPlex. It's how the advisory firm that I work for, that's how they really operate. That's really what, new age field managers, if you will, are trying to think about. So we know what the problem is. We know that we have high use fields that need to be open, as many days of the year as that they could possibly be open. So how do we provide that kind of surface? How do we provide a field that can meet those demands and or expectations? We also know that fields typically, or grass fields typically, get a reputation that they fail, or there's a lot of issues, or it's challenging. So really kind of one of the things I would encourage you as we talk about this, well, if you tried something in the past and it didn't work, let's try something different. Let's not do the same thing. Let's try something different, because maybe we can get a different result. The definition of sanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So, things we talk to field managers about, professional level field managers, are if a field failed, then typically we might say, well, it got too much use. Well, maybe it was our maintenance that failed instead of too much use. Maybe we should change the way we're maintaining the field. So just a little encouragement, just to kind of evolve as we look at ways or things to focus on, especially in the springtime. As we were just opening here, I made, we chatted about how cold it's been, and Now there's been a lot of snow and a lot of rain. I mean, you all, good part of the state, just like us over here in Western Maryland, we're extremely dry going into even around Christmas time. We had irrigation on at SoccerPlex. I just blew it out. I guess this past week, the first week of the year, we had irrigation on later than we ever have, because in National Weather Service actually, or NOAA, had us in a drought situation. Not anything like California or Colorado's facing, but for our area, we were definitely dry. Now that's changed. The good thing is a lot of the snow and a lot of this rain is going to soak into the soil over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, especially if things kind of trend the way they're looking, that it looks like we're going to warm back up a little bit. So you're obviously dealing with wet fields is one of the biggest challenges in the springtime. This up and down is good for that, though. These 40 to, if we had 40 degree, 50 degree days, today as we're talking, we're not going to go above freezing over here in Maryland. So I'm sure that you have locations in West Virginia that are not going to get into the 20s today. That's good, because that's Mother Nature giving us free soil decompaction. The freezing and thawing is fracturing that soil, especially with as much rain and moisture, right, as much moisture as we've had. So that ice that's forming down through that soil is softening up that soil. So straight away, this kind of up and down, it's annoying for us as humans, because one day we might wear a light jacket, the next day we might need a parka. It's great for the soil because it warms up, thaws out, or warms up and thaws out, cools back down, freezes. Really, the more freezing and thawing we get, the better off for the soil. So there is a positive to it. is to take away. So really one of the biggest things we encourage folks for with springtime maintenance is, in alluding to that, if you do have puddles, one of the first things to do, even in February time, if you get a nice day and you've got low areas on fields that are puddles, and you have you have a squeegee, a hand pump, some way to get the water out of the puddles. The sooner as you get the water out of the puddles, the better, because then you don't have to wait for that. Your high spots on your field are going to be dry, and your low spots are still going to be wet. Also, just as a rule of thumb, we encourage people to get a couple of, or get a case of green paint, aerosol cans of green grass paint, and mark those low spots. Because then once the grass starts growing, if you can take a sod cutter out and just fix those certain spots, just hand sod cutter from a rental place. There's a couple of really good sod farms in West Virginia. There's one up by Charlestown that has some of the best varieties of sod in the whole country. Green Horizons, I believe, is what it's called. Could be wrong there, but if there's some small spots like that, go and just fix them. It's not a lot of work. It's not a lot of money. Well, I say it's not a lot of work. It's a sod cutter and a shovel, so it's some work. It's some work, but it's not a lot of money. It's one good thing, is it's not expensive to. Same thing for your goal mouse. If they're bare completely and you can get in February time and then there's not too much frost in the ground and get some sod down, it's really a good time, because the grass can grow some roots before mid-March, early April, before the season really picks up. So addressing those small areas is important, because you don't want a small 1,000 square foot spot keep you from using your whole 2-acre field. So just thinking about it that way, what's the lowest common denominator to address? So then once you get into bigger things, I mean, mowing is usually the first thing that we encourage people to do to their field in the spring to get the brown cut off the grass. And when I'm talking about mowing, I'm talking about scalping, really, in a way, in the springtime. If you're cutting with a zero turn or such, and you're cutting it 2.5, 3 inches tall, probably typically, I would assume that most of the rec fields are being cut. Cut it down to an inch and a half to 2 inches. Cut it down into the brown. Get the brown. let that sun get to any green leaves that might be there, because those green leaves are going to, and that's where photosynthesis is at. We're going back to what is the Adam Sandler movie that he talks, chlorophyll, borophyll. He's in, I guess, it's a Tommy Boy. It's it's important. If you don't have green leaves, you don't have energy production. So the quicker you get the sunlight to the green leaves down in the crown of the plant, down towards the ground. Also, the more leaf tissue you cut off, the easier it is for the sunlight to get to the soil. The whole key for spring green up is getting the soil temperature up, getting the soil temperature to be warmer. We need 50 to 55 degrees soil temperature for Kentucky bluegrass and fescue to really start to go. Perennial ryegrass will start to grow, mid 40s, maybe low 50s. And that's it. That's in the top 2 inches. If you just enjoy it, I know we were chatting about how maybe a lot of you are kind of novice, but you enjoy this. Take your meat thermometer with you when you go out on the field and stick that little baby in the ground, and then that's we work with pro teams all over the world, and my soil temperature thermometer is a meat thermometer that I got from Lowe's. So that's as sophisticated as it gets right there. So
let me ask you while you're on this subject,
Sure,
talking about cutting, and I think this may be an overlooked point for a lot of the folks that deal with maintenance and mowing. I know once I started doing this, I saw dramatic results. Sharpening the blade on your mower. Talk to us about the importance of having a sharp blade on that mower.
And it's vital. It's vital to not rip. You can get a clean cut and keep that grass moving through. But equally to that is keeping a sharp blade, but then also not overworking the blades that you have. Not cutting off too much grass at one time. Mowing is time consuming. But from a rec field standpoint, it's probably, outside of soil decompaction, which we'll talk about, the lack of mowing is probably the leading factor for low quality recreational fields. And I'm not talking about that, hey, we have to mow them short. But I'm talking about, even if you're mowing at 2 inches, if you're going to ever get below 2 inches, you should probably be mowing twice a week, or at least the thickest spots on your field 2 times a week. Being able to get consistent so you're not cutting too much. I see more fields damaged because they have too much grass cut off them at one time than I do any other single thing that I see with rec fields. And that's consistent across the country. And then, in fairness, volunteers and people, mowing is expensive to pay a contractor. It's time consuming to have a volunteer come and do, but it's so important. The other part is the more you mow, so the less you're cutting off, the more positive fertilizer, the better feeding you're giving your field, because the smaller the clippings, the easier it is for the soil microbes to break them down and actually return them back to the soil to actually use as natural fertilizer. If it's in the leaf blade, the plant has wanted it. Its roots have taken it up and brought it into the plant. It's eaten that food out of the soil. It's in the leaf blade. So when you cut off that tissue, you return it back to the soil. That's free fertilizer. Take it. Now, if you're scalping and cutting way too much grass, every single time, you're just going to accumulate thatch, because there's no way for the soil microbes to keep up with that kind of mass, that kind of volume. So it's really important. But to your point with sharp blades, if you're going to get a clean cut with some fine clippings, it's really important. Really important. It's important for the grass not to beat it to death, as unscientific as that is. But it's a really key point. And in the springtime, when you scalp it down, you may need to mow it 2 or 3 times. You may need to mow over it and then come back the next day, mow over it again, cut it a different direction. Those kinds of things, to be able to bring that mowing height down, get the sunlight to the canopy, get the sunlight to those green leaves, get the sunlight to that soil to help that plant green up and really start to grow. And at the same time, once you're cutting green grass, to be able to provide natural fertilizer for your field, especially on native soil fields. So that's which everyone at this level is really has. So does that what do you typically see most clubs cutting their fields with? Just a zero turn or such?
Usually just a typical riding mower that you would get at a home improvement store.
Oh,
I mean, some places have a zero turn, but I think mostly it's just a typical riding mower that.
gotcha. It's amazing that even at the pro level, well, especially the pro level, most or a good portion of the pro level fields are cut with walk behind mowers now. Now they have staff to cut. They have the staff to cut with 3 different walk behind mowers. But there's a lot of good quality walk behind mowers that would be 30 to 36 inches wide that can actually make a pretty good impact, and you can actually mow more than you realize. When you put 2 or 3 of them out there, even with a 21-inch push mower. My first job in pro sports was I was on the grounds crew for the Kansas City Royals as an intern, and my first day, me and one other intern push mowed the entire outfield. It's like, well, what about all those mowers sitting in that shop? And it's like, they wanted to collect clippings and get everything. So you don't have to have fancy mowing equipment to be able to have success, especially if you stay on it and do it often. To be able to not cut too much at one time. But it's really important in the spring to get the spring green up, to be able to have success. The next thing we encourage in the springtime is to, now we just talked about Mother Nature is doing us a favor by taking compaction out of the soil. If you have access to any sort of aerification equipment, typically we would recommend it be done in the fall, to be able to foster more freezing and thawing. But especially in high traffic areas, goal mouths, right down the middle of the field. I'll show you some traffic maps as we close out. In soccer, at least on a full sided match, typically 75% of a match is played on about 35%, 40% of the field. We're still trying to figure out how to bribe coaches to go do warm-ups in the corners. We're trying to, and it's I had a, and I will show you a map. I had the privilege of overseeing field maintenance for MLS's back, the return to play tournament we did in 2020 after the stop of the season. We played 51 matches in 35 days on just 3 fields at Wide World of Sports at Walt Disney World. Every single professional team, every single youth team, kind of the thing that happens is you warm up in front of your bench. And the area in front of the benches during that tournament was a bigger problem than the goal mouths, was a bigger problem than the center circle that was right in front of the benches where every single team warms up. So, that's a whole nother discussion of encouraging coaches to think about not warming up in the same spot, because it does have an impact on play, but our maintenance has to offset that. So if we can have access to aerification equipment, to soil decompaction equipment, to break up that compaction, that field's going to be more compact in front of that bench or in front of that goal or down the middle of that field where 75% of the play is at. You don't need to spend time and money on decompacting the soil in the corners of the field, unless you have coaches that are already, thinking about spreading it out. And most clubs do not. So you can. I got a video here. If you're watching this decompaction machine working, it's probably worth considering. Having some sort of funds to be able to maybe fund a contractor to do some spot aerification work, decompaction. Excuse me, I'm using the word aerification kind of in replacement of decompaction, aerification is essentially letting air into the soil, which is what soil decompaction is doing, is letting air into the soil. So I apologize for the confusion in the terminology. I mean decompaction each time, so I'll try to be a little more clear on that. We field people throw around these terms that we just assume people know, and they don't, and that's okay. So, if you have a fund that you can pay a contractor, or partner with a contractor locally that come in and just hit your high traffic areas, once or twice, 3 times a year, whatever it might be. This time of the year in the spring, the only areas that you would need to hit are your high traffic areas. The rest, your corners and such, don't need it because Mother Nature's taking care of it. Really, what you're trying to do is even up the whole field. Let's say Mother Nature has broken compaction and reduced soil compaction by, let's say, 20% across the whole field. Well, if the middle of the field is 50% more compact than the outside of the field, well, you still only your middle's still going to be more compact. So that's why you would have a contractor, or doesn't matter if it's a pitchfork. Yeah, it takes time, but a pitchfork and a goal mouth just to kind of work it and break up the soil, that's fine. For your mower, something I just thought of that we see several clubs do. You can get a lawn spiker. It doesn't seem like it would help a lot. A spiker is really, if it's got slicing blades on it, knives, really, really helpful. The spoons, like to pull the plugs, not really as helpful. But if you can get a pull behind spiker that you can, and I know some clubs that they essentially pull that around each time that they mow. So they're spiking the surface almost every single time that they mow. You cannot slice like that too much. So that'd be a great thing. Just, you don't want to do it when it's super hot and dry if you don't have irrigation. But especially spring and fall, the more you can spike it, just to open it up. That's a great thing. It's a great thing. So I should have thought of that before, about how simple something like spiking really is, because it makes you don't feel like you're necessarily doing a lot, but you are, I promise you. It's definitely making a difference. So something to also in the spring to think about would be a compost application, to be able to help stimulate the soil microbes. We were talking about breaking down those grass clippings to be free fertilizer. The soil's a living organism in itself. There's hundreds of thousands, and if not millions of different types of of biology in the soil that are it's a living thing itself. The more you feed that, the better off and stronger your grass is going to be. A compost application, I got a photo of product from a company called Earthworks that we use at Maryland SoccerPlex and that we use at Natural Grass Advisory Group. It's chicken compost. I mean, it's literally just chicken manure that's been composted. And chickens, especially egg-laying chickens, they feed the chickens a lot of feed to be able to produce eggs. And something like 70% of what they feed them comes out their back end. Well, that's free fertilizer in a way. So it's not free because you still have to buy it, but once they compost that, it's extremely rich in minerals. It's extremely high in calcium, which is really, really important for plants, especially on our soils. A lot of the soil through West Virginia is pretty similar to our soil here in Western Maryland. That calcium is really important for it. Really important. A compost like this would be at least 10% in calcium. Why? Calcium is good for the eggs because it makes the eggshell. It's also good for the plant because it helps the plant be stronger, just like kind of making that eggshell stronger. So just following any spring aerification or such. Also, microbes will actually, and there's things that will actually decompact the soil itself. Like the soil will decompact itself if you feed it properly. And I'm not saying use a lot of synthetic fertilizer. We're not big advocates for using a bunch of synthetic fertilizer to jumpstart anything, because you're not you're not working with the budgets for that, but also it's just there's not that much benefit to it. Yes, if your soil test is calling for some synthetic fertilizer, maybe you can add some, but in most of your situations, I don't expect that's probably going to be the case. So we typically recommend some sort of organic fertilizer to be able to just feed, but then also stimulate the soil to get the double benefit of that to be able to have success. Did that bring any questions to mind? I know the fertilizer can be really confusing, but just we try to keep it pretty simple.
Yeah, no, not at all. Good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So something else in the spring, if you have access to something that we call them grow covers, grow blankets, they're big sheets of plastic or such that essentially make a greenhouse. Even if your covers are on for 2 weeks, it can help your grass green up. We encourage clubs to maybe do this on their goal mounds that are thin. You can throw some grass seed down in the thin area, cover it up for a few weeks, just to try to, you can cover it up as long as you want. At least when it's not actively growing. It makes a dramatic difference. You can get 7 to 10 degrees difference in the soil temperature, and and even more than that, 10 to 15 degrees in the grass canopy during the day. It will help your grass green up earlier. If you need green up and you need recovery, you don't have to cover the whole field. You can just cover certain areas, certain spots that you're having problems with. You want to get some seed grown in. That's a really good tool to be able to kind of spot check or spot treat some areas. Something else that also makes a dramatic difference is paint. They make grass paint, literally just green paint for grass, to be able to excuse me. You think about, you put your hand on a surface like your car hood or something that's a dark surface on a sunny afternoon in the wintertime. It's warmer. I put a photo in here of, we painted the middles of the fields at SoccerPlex for the winter, to be able to generate heat and be able to keep growth happening. Now, this photo's also got some grow sheets, some grow covers on the goal mounds, but it wouldn't be cost effective to be able to go out and cover every single field, because the covers would be too expensive. So using the paint as our friend to be able to absorb some extra heat, and maybe we've seen about 2 weeks extra growth out of this, which is really important to us because we finish right around Thanksgiving time. It's going cold. We're not getting much growth. If we can get 2 weeks more growth to get recovery, then we're that much closer to being ready for springtime. Same thing in spring green up. If you put some green paint out in early March, even if it's just in around your high traffic areas that you just want to try to stimulate some growth, you can buy different paint products on the internet and mix them up and put them in a hand sprayer and just spray them on those areas. No problem at all. It's really simple. And not nearly as expensive as having to buy covers. It's not as efficient or as effective as buying covers or using covers, but it absolutely helps. So a small thing like that to try to save some money. When you put down your seed in the spring, if you've got some areas that are thin, I put a photo in the slides here. If you're watching online with us, the importance of working the seed in, that you can see the seed lines from our slit seeder that we use at Maryland SoccerPlex to cut the seed into the soil to where the cleats don't get to the crown of the plant. If you just sprinkle your seed across the top and then just play on it, then the cleats are right there in that seed and they can rip the seed out of the ground. So even if you're seeding by hand, you take a little garden weasel, something, a hard rake, mix your seed with some soil and throw out the seed soil together, where got a bucket full of, do half a bucket of soil, do 4 or 5 handfuls of seed, mix all that together, then you can throw your seed and soil out together. So then your seed's just not laying on the ground where, 1, the cleats will tear it out, or 2, the birds will come along and eat it. kind of preserve that seed and give it a chance, because your fields are going to get beat up. You're going to use them. That's what they're there for. It's important. So to be able to protect that seedling, to be able to let it kind of get germinated and get established. The new seed varieties, it's incredible. The photo I'm showing, this is 2 weeks after seeding with Kentucky bluegrass, and Kentucky bluegrass is typically thought to take 14 to 21 days to germinate. This is 14 days, and I mean there's spots on there's spots on this field that are going to need to be mowed in another week. Those kinds of grass seed, that's another thing that's important. You might pay more money for grass seed, but you don't need to use it on the whole field. You would just use the better quality grass seed in the middle of the field, in your high traffic areas, in your thin spots down the middle, like to use those better varieties of seed. Yeah, they are at least double the price, but if you have $100, in theory, if you have $100, I'd rather you spend $100 in seed for the middle of the field versus $50 or $100 for the whole field. So focus your resources in the high traffic areas, because those are the areas that are obviously giving you trouble. But it's really, really important to get that seed worked in to give it a chance. You can throw, just put a photo in here of us spreading some sand for top dressing. I mean, you can, get a few buckets of sand and just spread the sand by hand as well to protect the crown, protect that growing point as that seed germinates. Now, I describe the mix some seed together with the soil. Now, even as the seed starts to come up, okay, yeah, you're getting some good growth. Throw a little sand in there, throw a little compost in there. Don't bury it, but just protect the crown. Just help provide a barrier between the cleat and the seedling itself, just to be able to give a little bit of extra chance to help that seed survive.
It's one of my favorite activities.
Yeah, exactly. And also you can use something like profile porous ceramic, turfus. You can use that, like you use that typically on baseball fields. You don't want to use that and play on it immediately, but you can also use, because that absorbs water and it also is porous, so it has airspace to be able to hold some nutrients and some water. Works really well also to be able to be effective and impactful as well. So I described all these things. We talked about cutting down the grass, to get the sunlight to the canopy, to the soil. We talked about getting some compaction out. We talked about adding some compost and or some organic fertilizer to stimulate some growth. And we talked about the importance of good seed and getting that seed soil contact. These are things that I would encourage you, as I use that quote. In the past, if you've tried something and it's worked and it hasn't worked, like these are the areas that are really important to make changes, because if you get those things right, you get those things, you improve and evolve your tactics to be able to have some success. These are the areas that are the most important. Now, for maximum efficiency, you can use the best grass seed in the world, but if you don't get the grass cut down and mowed and keep it mowed properly, then you're not going to get the maximum results out of that best grass seed. Same thing with, if you've got compaction that you just can't get out of the soil, then the grass is really never going to grow, no matter how much fertilizer you throw out or how much you mow it or how much grass seed you put on it. That compaction, if I handed you a plate of food and said, here, let's have some lunch, but then I put a plastic bag over your head where you can't breathe. If the soil is compact, there's no airspace. So the microbes can't breathe to break down any fertilizer you put in there. The roots can't grow down because there's no airspace. So it's really important to remember that it's a puzzle. It's really a puzzle. Like you have to have the pieces of the puzzle right. That doesn't mean it's complicated. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by that, but each thing you do is important. And don't minimize. Oh, well, I didn't see a big change in this. it's a process. We go back to we go back to the Bill Belichick, Nick Saban type philosophy of trust the process. You have to trust the process because maintaining a field is a process.
And you have to be patient. These results are not going to come overnight.
What's that word? Patient?
Patience.
Patience.
Patience and consistency.
That's right. And that's patience it's the key. It's the key. But you have to.
Don't these fields look familiar?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, and that's what, as a generic thought, it's the middle of the field on the goal mouth closest to the parking lot. And this doesn't matter if this could be in, I can get a photo from our office in Japan. I can get a photo from somebody in Brazil. I can get a photo from somebody in California. I can get some photo from somebody in West Virginia. It's the goal mouth closest to the parking lot, right in the middle of the field every single time. And that's the area that needs more work. This whole field doesn't need an equal amount of work, does it? Or either one of these. It's the areas that get the most use that need the most work.
It's crazy.
And when you break it down into total square footage, I mean, you're talking about a full-size field would be 2 acres, would be about 85,000 square feet, we're talking about less than 20,000 square feet that really need, at Maryland SoccerPlex, we maintain the middle 25,000 square feet of our fields completely different than the remaining 3/4 of our field, because so much traffic is right in the middle of that field, right in the spot that it doesn't matter if it's lacrosse or soccer or football or whatever it is, it's overlapping. It's down the middle. It's down the middle. It's down the middle. Even if we shift it a little bit, it's still in the middle. So we have different equipment. We have a different philosophy. We approach everything differently. We water it differently. We do everything differently through the middle of that field, because that's the only way we're going to get maximum usage out of our fields, is to be able to maintain that area differently. I think this is a fun photo that this is a professional level field that we were preparing with Paris Saint-Germain in China a couple of years ago in preparation for their training camp. And this is nothing to do with the field manager of this field. It just, the map just shows that the red area on the map, you see goal mouth on one end, goal mouth on the other end. Can you tell which end that the locker room is on?
Yes.
Exactly. It's at all levels, because it has nothing to do with the field or the team. It's the field maintenance, and our maintenance has to change, has to evolve to be able to meet the demands of the teams. Now, if a coach wants to practice on his end of the field every single time, well, then that's his prerogative. We would love for them to move around, but it's our job as field managers to try to offset that usage. So in this red area, the amount of energy that was being absorbed by the soil was 52%. And in the dark green area, the amount of energy being absorbed by the soil was 78%. So that shows the difference in compaction level, because the energy is not getting into the soil. And that's a dramatic difference. And that's on a pro level field. And so you're not alone. I just showed that photo of some park fields of having issues. It's at all levels. I mean, we've just come into the infancy of data in field surfaces. We're only about, we as a firm at Natural Grass Advisory Group, from a data standpoint, have only been in business for like I said, the data business for 4.5 years. Sports science is an evolving thing. All you as coaches are dealing with that. Field science is an evolving thing, and it's making it easier to maintain our fields. You don't need maps like this to do it. Just focus on where your high traffic areas are. One thing you could do as well, I just thought of this, was put a drone up. Take your drone that if you have a drone that you use to maybe record some training sessions, or just hobbyist with your drone, take some photos above the field. Dramatic what you can see when it comes to field conditions. You'll see your thin areas, and but the sky cam is a field manager's worst nightmare, because from above you can see everything. So when you start putting your drone up, you can see the areas that need to be focused on. And if it's green, hey, good to go. If it's not, we've all your maintenance there a little bit more. So I put one of these last photos in here. The importance of grass varieties, like this field split down the middle. Now, this was an experiment that we did back in 2013. Same play, same maintenance, same everything. It's just the difference in the grass varieties. And we were getting better traffic tolerance out of one. And obviously we changed most of the fields of SoccerPlex changed to the grass variety that was on the right. Because it's like, hey, that's how we get more use out of our fields. It's important, like it's this dramatic by, when I'm talking about the difference in quality seed or changing different grass varieties. So it's it can be that simple. Like it can, something like that can make that big a difference. So it's really, really, really helpful when it comes to that. So did you have any other questions that popped into your mind?
No, that's pretty much about it. I mean, I think you gave us a lot of great information, a lot of tidbits that we can use going forward to kind of help our grassroots soccer programs figure out what they need to be looking for, what they need to be doing, and also, like I said, some practical advice on that. Speaking with Jerad Minnick, Director of Grounds for Maryland SoccerPlex, Lead Advisor, Natural Grass Advisory Group, and Field Surface Advisor for Major League Soccer. Jerad, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for the time. Thanks for the interest. Keep at it. Keep at it.
And thank you for listening to the podcast. Remember, make sure you like, subscribe, and share our program, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the West Virginia Soccer Association Beyond the Pitch podcast. You can catch a brand new episode every Thursday morning here on the WVSA Digital Network, or find us on our social media platforms at WV Soccer. Copyright 2022. All rights reserved.